Hello, everybody. Welcome to But Why the Reviews, and today we're going to be talking about EA Sports Madden NFL 26. I'm your host, Matt, and I'll be joined by Kyle.
Yay, football.
Yes, and Kyle, can you kind of tell everybody a little bit about yourself before we dive in here?
Yes, so I am a sports writer in Orlando. I cover Major League Soccer and the National Women's Soccer League. Sports is kind of my big thing. It's what I do. So I typically, for But Why Though, am the sports guy. If there's a sports game, Matt will say, "Where's Kyle?" And there I am. So big into the Madden games, college football, all different types of sports games. So it's my bread and butter here.
Yes, and obviously for butwhytho.net, if you haven't unfamiliar, that is the website for here, and you did our Madden NFL 26 review, so go check that out for that. Which is always weird. I keep forgetting that they changed the official name to Madden NFL 26, which may have always been it. I just never referred to it that way, but that is what it is. Um, and so let's kind of get into it. I'm not gonna lie. I haven't played a Madden in probably about 10 years. Finally, with CFB being back. I've been kind of getting more back into my sports game because I always played sports games, but there, and then we could feel some of the effects, which we'll talk about a little bit of. CFB being back means Madden's trying new things as well, and so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a try here and see how it goes. So I guess from that point on, how was your initial, I guess assessment coming in, like playing for 26?
It was immediately noticeable, like you just said, the change from now that the college football franchise is back. They are now trying to go, ooh, maybe we need to try to match kind of the big knock on Madden for the last, like you said, decade since you'd played at least regularly. It's been really stale. It just they've gone for the more quote unquote authentic feel, and it's just too slow and awkward and not very fun. And the big thing with the college football game that everyone was skeptical about going in was, is it going to be fast paced and whatever? And it was. It succeeded. And so now with Madden, now they are trying to catch up to that. They're trying to make it so it's a little more engaging, it's more fluid, it's more there's clearly some attention to detail in the game, and you notice that the first time you play. The first running play that you make, you notice that the blocking seems to be a little bit smarter, the running seems to be a little bit better. Same with running routes and doing all that. Defense also feels a lot better. There's some changes they made under the hood for defense. I will be honest, I play defense not often.
Wow.
I am terrible at defense, so I am not, it's not my thing. It's like when I used to play the NCAA games, I would like start as an offensive coordinator because I was like, this is what I prefer. But I mean, I do play. I a lot of times if I'm trying to like get quick games in, I'll do like the play the moments thing. So I am playing defense. I'm just like not going out of my way to do it because I don't love it. But I'm noticing in Madden 26, I'm enjoying it a little bit more. It seems a little more intuitive, a little bit easier to know the things that I'm trying to do. There's obviously a depth to it that you can master, but even just the initial plug in and play seems pretty straightforward and pretty easy to get a handle of.
Yeah. So obviously for people in my background, I have as a Dolphins fan, I feel like that crying face, one, represents everything Miami's been through, but also you not wanting to play defense at this point.
Defense is overrated. Call me the Big 12. I don't believe in it.
Yeah. So kind of we'll jump right into the gameplay, and that's the first thing I notice is, and I'm with you of like I kind of quit playing Madden for various reasons. But one of them was I felt like everybody it was a giant slog, and everybody ran so slow, and they ran in either mud or combat boots, as I've said. But right in this game, I think I did, excuse me, I did a preview for it, and I was like, oh wow, this feels better paced, and I feel like players actually run and move now. It's not just like moving in slow motion. And no, kind of dive into the gameplay. Yeah, I think that the tempo of the game feels much better in my opinion. I do like that they've taken a lot of that from CFB. Like, no, because I love the CFB games, the older, whether the older ones, newer ones, you know, that faster pace, that more wide open offense and defense, and being able to player movement and that explosiveness. And I do think right off the bat playing, you do feel that. Obviously there's still some stuff in there that I'm not sure, like they do have like some of the UI and adjustment things, trying to still learning about and going through compared to CFB. I can't just run my option, but it has been fascinating from being gone so long of as a person who runs the spread option CFB, seeing all like what Lamar Jackson and some of the other players that have come up in the last, 5, 6 years have done to the NFL of seeing like, oh, I can run the zone read. I can run kind of the regular speed option. I don't think you can live off of it like maybe in CFB, but being having a lot of these playbooks or these options on the plays, and even some of the defenses that have changed, seeing maybe a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5 stuff, been very compelling to like, to play both, to play both games or to play Madden. I guess we talked about some of the changes they've done for the gameplay. Obviously, the tempo is the big one. Um, is there anything else that really stood out to you? I guess I know we've added. I guess stunts was a big one. I know people have been waiting for that. They've gotten both. Um,
Well, one of the things you mentioned was the explosiveness. I thought that was really interesting. It was one of the things I noticed on like one of my first big runs that I broke off. You kind of feel when you're doing any sort of a running play or even when they've caught the ball, there's a brief moment where they're kind of slow, and then if you're able to get an angle and just blow up into space, then you're able to it's off to the races. And that was the thing that I felt like unless you were running a busted play in Madden before, that wasn't really a thing that would happen as often. So it definitely feels like there's a lot more the initial like in the trenches stuff is still tough. But then once you get into space, you're able to feel the difference in the players. Similar to like they talked about one of the big things they tried to do is make the quarterbacks all feel really different.
mhm.
And I noticed there is a difference when you're playing with Lamar Jackson versus, um, Jared Goff. There's a huge difference in the way that those players move in the pocket and what you can do with them. You can't just try to do the same thing with every player, which is a thing that the stats had always been different, but the actual physical movements and the way they controlled was not always easy to tell apart. And it's so obvious that they've spent time on that in 26.
That's good, yeah. Because I mean, like I said, a person from CFB, you can definitely tell a difference. I know that was a long thing they worked on because everybody just said, "Hey, I can run the options if I feel like it, or I should be able to pass if I feel like it." And I'm like, that's really not how this works. And so, I'm glad to see that they have it, made some changements and adjustments for the gameplay, like in that terms of everything else. I guess I mean, do you feel, because obviously I think they've been already using the physics stuff. So, I mean, is there anything you feel like far as physics or outside I guess, the tempo of movement of players or any of the adjustments? Because obviously they added the stunts I mentioned before, and then I think there's like the route commits and some of the custom stuff, which basically we talked about in CFB. Do you think they work well, I guess, in Madden as well?
Yeah, I think it works well. I don't know if I like it as much in Madden as I did in CFB, but I think part of that is just the difference in college and NFL. And I think there's definitely a lot more that you can do in CFB versus in Madden. The other thing is because there's such a there you don't have the skill gaps in Madden, just in terms of the player ratings. Like you're not going up against a team that's rated in the 40s or 50s.
Right.
So it's harder to pull off some of the things, which I thought was interesting. And then the physics stuff, especially with I noticed with run blocking and tackling, like that whole movement, the in the trenches stuff, you notice a lot more of it's not that awkward, like I'm just kind of running into a brick wall and nothing's happening. It's like players are bouncing off of things and moving off in ways that, again, I keep going back to like feeling authentic, but that's kind of the thing that Madden's always been going for and taking the more physics based approach instead of just pre-done animations that are triggered by certain things that's allowed that to grow organically. And I think this is just the next step in that where it continues to improve. And this is the best that it's been, in a long time.
That's good. I know the funny thing for me was looking at the playbooks of like, I think play calling I felt was going to be very, I don't want to say basic, but I feel like a lot of the NFL teams, I don't want to say they run the same plays, but they, or the
They
same
do.
type of offense, but yeah, they really do. Yeah, cool. We're all about anywhere between 55, 45 run pass with maybe a few outliers. Like, cool. But no, I do think the playbooks were actually pretty well done. I think I like they have a lot of motion. I think there's a lot of pretty good route combinations. I think some of the running, like getting different run plays, different sets, and everything else. I was actually taken away and surprised by that because that's something that I thought Madden you could just plug in and pretty much every playbook was gonna feel the same. And like I said, I've been a long time since I played, so for all I know, this has been different. But I do know at least looking at here, it doesn't. There seems to be more creativity. I know they big the hype on the coach DNA with the whole suggestion thing. Um, I don't know if they quite nailed that, to be completely honest. I do feel like I get a lot of the same plays. Also, if you tell me the analytics of something is 0%, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that information.
Yeah, I thought that the coach DNA stuff is interesting. It's just kind of the next evolution of the coach suggestion thing that they've always had, which has
Right.
always been a bit of a crapshoot. I'm like you. I don't really feel there's some times where I'm like, all right, you're giving me the same plays over and over again, or because I played a game with only doing the coach suggested picks just to see what would happen as it evolves, and I went 3.5 quarters without having a run play given to my team.
Ooh.
And I was like, that just seems a little weird. So there's some kinks in that to be worked out over time, whether it's in this game or in the next version. But I did like that they're at least trying to give more of like the situational awareness. So if it's, hey,
Yes.
this is the play, look for these two players. Things that for someone who's more advanced as a player might already be doing that and more. Somebody who's coming in and hasn't played before or doesn't have like a super deep understanding, it's helpful to know, hey, look for, your fullback in the flat. Oh, I that might not have been their initial first or second read. And so now it's just getting players to kind of think a little bit more. So in that aspect, it's good. But I think in terms of actually taking the data from the game, and they talked about using like an AI, I forget what the phrasing is, but an AI thing to basically they're taking the input from both the game and real football, which is how these games have always
Right.
operated, which is why I think it's funny they're using the AI term just because that's the cat. They've always done this.
Yeah.
And it's getting a little bit better, but there's times where I'm like, why are you calling this play? Like this is or suggesting this play. This
The
is not a good
the only
option.
thing I'll give benefit of doubt is it somehow ended up way better than CFBs this year, which I feel like I don't know if they just broke it from last year, which I don't even think broke, but like, oh my gosh, it's the code suggestions in CFB right now are very bad.
Oh, it's just
Um,
this that's just the same three plays every time in
yeah, or
CFB.
just even terrible. Like I remember I had a 3rd and 19 or something like that, and like you're gonna run goal line, and I'm like, what's not?
Yep.
But no,
It is better in Madden for sure.
yeah, so I'm glad, but to your point, I'm glad they're tinkering with some of this stuff, and whether to be giving more, data and more, I guess whether it's authentic or not, but also just helping the lower players. Because in the day, like you said, for the most part, they probably have the data in here, but like people are calling coach suggestions because going through 300, 400 plays, especially if you're not used to playbooks or you're used to other stuff, it can be very challenging, taxing, or just straight up annoying. And so like when you're playing, you're like, and you can find your own self running like the same plays over and over again because you're like, I don't want to search through these playbooks. So I do think, trying to implement better coach suggestions with the DNA and given better logic and situational, I think it's overall a good thing, and it will in theory should help people learn to go. I guess we'll go into like the next our first like I guess um game mode we'll probably talk about I guess the superstar and dynasty or excuse me franchise. I have to get a correct term for the correct game. It's been throwing me off for the last month. But going into superstar, what are your thoughts on that? I don't they made some changes. I'm not um but what do you think here?
So the one thing with sports games that I think never really does well is when they try to give any sort of like a either story or player narrative control into a single player mode. It's always awkward. It's always weird. I feel like they've gotten a little bit better with this because it's predominantly built on the things that you're doing in game. There are still like the occasional conversation options, which are always just really weird. And that's in franchise mode too. You just have these things where I'm like, this is just an awkward conversation. But there's a new the spheres of influence where you are building relationships with players, coaches, etc. And so, like for example, if you're a quarterback and you constantly throw to your tight end, you develop a better relationship with that tight end, and it can build up through tiers. And there's different boosts and stuff that happen as you're doing that. So it's a really good thing to pay attention to. You also get to a point where you can lose influence points. So if you have, say George Pickens is a wide receiver and you don't throw the ball to him, well, then he gets a little pissy and he doesn't really like you. So I think you can build up to the point where they call it the inner circle. So you can build up your relationship with someone where you can't lose points anymore. So if you want to hyper focus on a particular player or whatever, then you can do that. Same thing with the coaches. You build your relationship with the coaches, which lets you kind of like in CFB, when you're earning coach trust, you get more playbook and pre-play commands and different things that you're allowed to do. So there's some things with that that's really neat. It's not too overbearing, but there's definitely some things where I'm like, okay, do I need to be building a relationship with a tattoo artist? Like I want
You
to
never know,
play.
man. Apparently, you never know. I know people that do have relationship with tattoo artists. Not
Oh no,
me, but
no,
there are
no,
people
no.
out there.
In real life, I think I don't mean that as a real life thing. I just mean like I'm playing Madden. I'm not trying to like
Hey,
do
I
the.
just
It's like
meant people that they're not their friends. We have a relationship because I get that many tattoos, and I'm like,
yeah.
sure, man, I get it.
Yeah, so I mean it's cool. There's weekly activities, there's things you can do, whether they're like there's like not in game in like the football game mindset. So there's like you could do like marketing events and things like that that you do. And if you choose to do it, it helps with certain things, whether it's with brands, agents, coaches, players, whatever. So there's all sorts of different things, and then there's obviously stuff during the games where it's like you have situational moments, things to accomplish. So it's all cool for the most part. It's fine. It doesn't really move the needle in a way that's like, oh my god, I can't believe this. But it is definitely a lot different. The one thing that I do really like is the career chapters. So you're not just building up your overall and becoming a starter. There's actually set goals that you can get to. So it starts with I'm looking at the list now because I want to make sure I get these right. But it starts with just you have high expectations, you move up the depth chart, you prove you belong, and it keeps going and going eventually to becoming a Hall of Famer. If you slide, there's a couple redemption chapters as well. So it's let's say you were, a Justin Fields type player who gets drafted really high, you don't pan out, and now you have things to go through where you're kind of redeeming that. So it is nice to add more of those quote unquote story elements, even if it's not going the 2K route where you're getting all these like really dumb cutscenes and stuff like that. It's a little more just based on the gameplay. I think, like I said, I think it works well. I think it's really cool. The chapters are nice. The spheres of influence stuff is fine. It's not necessarily something that I cared super deeply about, but it is cool to have, and it does make the mode a little more than just you could go in and play franchise mode and just double click the stick and lock in as a player. And what's the difference? So this definitely is trying to move it into more of its own distinct thing and give you reasons to enjoy. And if you want to craft your own little headcanon story about your players, you have different things in game that are helping you do that, which is cool.
Yeah, I'm glad that these modes are improving. It, like I said, for me, I usually used to do them like one time every year. I just do them once, like cool. And I'm not gonna lie, the last or so few years, so I just have not. I just haven't got myself to go back to do it. And maybe I'm too old. I'm gonna say I'm too old. That's what I'm blaming it on. But no, I'm glad to see there are improvements in here. I think the number one thing that I've been excited for, and I'm intrigued to see what they do in the future with, and because I mean, I know this was you talked about coach trust with CFB. I like adding negative like components to these modes. I know some people like, oh, we're just living out like power fantasies or whatever. That's cool. I get it. But I personally do like when games have a negative consequences for doing things, or you're just not, I hit a tier and I never have to worry about it. And so I'm intrigued to see if they do lean into some of those more in the future in both here, CFB, or even into the some of the other modes um as well. Like I just don't think when you unlock something, you should, especially with the way these things are up and down roller coasters of seasons, everything, you should be able to keep everything at all times.
Yeah. No, no, that's I think the coolest thing by far is that you can, and it's not just like, oh, you didn't throw for 400 yards and three touchdowns.
Right,
It's
right,
like you didn't target this player, and so now they are losing trust with you. So those aspects of it are really cool because it does make you conscious of a lot more things. So I agree. I think it's neat that they're making the changes, even though this probably isn't my go-to game mode. This is the one that I do every time just to say that I've done it and played through it, but I'm not spending, hundreds of hours in it.
right. And so we'll move on to the next game mode that you probably should spend hundreds of hours into would be franchise mode. Um, this has been basically they have kind of presented this for this year. Even talking with some of the developers earlier in the year in some of our preview coverage. This is the biggest upgrade that Madden franchise has received in about 10 years. And honestly, from first glance, I don't know what was in the previous renditions, so I can't speak from there, but I do think from just playing it straight up, there's a lot in here, and I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. I don't know if that's good or bad for what it compared to, but at least as a new person coming in, I'm like, wow, there is a lot of stuff. And there was even a few moments loading this up of going, CFB, you need to figure some of this stuff out here and what we're doing. So I guess we'll go from there. What you got from franchise here?
Yeah, there's a lot of new stuff, a lot of new changes, a lot of, things like your coordinators matter and you can now manage the weekly activities, the weekly training. Do you want your players to try to stay healthy or do you want them to try to develop? And there's a lot more to focus on that it can be a little if you're a hardcore CFB Dynasty player, trying to do all the minutia of stuff probably isn't going to bother you as much, even if it's in different ways. Coming in as somebody who's a more casual player, I think is going to hop into franchise mode and be a little bit like, oh my God, like what is going on? There is so much that you have to do, which, like you said earlier, for better or for worse, right? Like in the old Madden, let's go back a decade. Let's just say, the last time they really made big changes from what it's been pretty plug and play. You can just hop in, play the games, you can set everything else to happen automatically, or if you want to do it, there's not much to do. There's trades and free agents and the draft, and that's it. And you can practice if you want. You don't really have to. Like here, there, everything you choose to do can help you. You don't
Yes.
have to do everything. You can, whether you want to automate things, you want to simulate things or whatever, like you absolutely can do that, and there's not a penalty. But choosing to do all of the different little things and hyper focus on the coaching skills and abilities and all sorts of stuff can really unlock a completely new level, which I think is cool. The different archetypes are really nice. There's ways to develop what type of coach you are, if you're going to be focused on development or you're focused on, your defense, your offense. It's not like the most in-depth RPG system, but it's a really, really nice way to let you evolve your team in the specific way that you want. And again, it's something where if you're someone who's coming in and you're not like a hardcore player, you're just a casual, middle-aged person trying to hop on and play a couple games, you can do that. But if you want to be an absolute sicko and put in hundreds of hours and nitpick every single little thing, go through every menu page and every little thing, there is stuff there and it's worth doing. It's not just there kind of to be there. It just kind of needs refined a little bit now that they've made,
Yeah.
introduced it all.
So, I mean, obviously, kind of going to dive into a little more detail, a few things. Of one, I'm sure people are sad, so I'm gonna show my sad face, Mike McDaniel over here. Of wear and tears in this game now. I'm excited. I personally am a fan of wear and tear. I understand some of the logistics have not always been great. Particularly your running back seems to always die, but nobody else seems to be running back, quarterback. They're dead every day, play every 3 plays, but nobody else does. So I think there's problems. But no, I think adding wear and tear. I'm excited to see how this works. But they do at least give you trainers, like you talked about, with the ability to kind of overcome. Say from that, I like these ability things. I think it's funny because at first I was like, wow, it's really cheap to like pretty much buy. And one, you can buy anything you want, which is I guess fine, or you can just wait to unlock them, which I guess is dual edge, however you want. And then upgrading them, I realized the same principle. Either you can buy them or you can wait to upgrade them, which is kind of cool. And obviously they can get downgraded, which also back to that whole point of I like this give and take, where if you just play bad, you're not going to get to keep these. The play sheets, adding these play sheets, like you talked about this whole, there is an element in here where you could probably be spending, like CFB, where you spend like a little bit of recruiting, where you're spending just 30 minutes to an hour game planning for your next stuff, setting up your loadout, like you're setting up to do a Call of Duty match or something of here, each and every week. So I think there is some, not to say overwhelming, but depending on what you want to do, principles in here and properties of like, wow, this can be a lot. But as you said, different also adds feels like a lot of different elements. We talked about the coach DNA. Clearly, they're trying to dive in the coach with coordinators apparently mattering. Apparently they did not as before. Having these abilities, plug and play with some of these abilities. Upgrade, downgrade. Different archetypes and everything else. And then obviously you have the whole matchups scheme of things where they actually show your other team, show what the other coaching teams are looking for, how you can mix and match your abilities, whether you have the advantage, not advantage, and everything. So I think that's pretty cool. I don't know, doing that every week all the time. I mean, I'm sure it can be kind of, you could run into some issues, but then again, at the end of the day, that's part of being in these games to a degree. Because people always talk about recruiting's a lot. And I'm like, yeah, but recruiting, when you think about it, is make or break in college football. Like if you can recruit good, you're gonna be good eventually. You're gonna need some coaching, but in the day, recruiting is probably almost the number one facility outside of, I guess, money. But money at this point is recruiting. So, but anyways, but no, I do think having those different factors is kind of interesting and playing in depth in here. Whether it be the weekly strategy, whether it be some of the development. I learned they now have a practice squad, which I'm assuming was always in here. But seeing how all these things come together, uh, you know, kind of gives that nice immersion experience, which kind of goes to the next immersion experience, which probably the best thing that I've seen in a long time, which is probably dumb, which I don't know if people think. These weekly recaps, one, I love Scott Hansen. Shout out to Scott
Yep.
Hansen, but the weekly recaps are fantastic to just watch.
It's
Um,
it's so cool. I wish it showed more. That's my only real knock on it is like it's only showing just a handful of games and usually like one moment from it. It's not like a real I would watch a 30-minute highlight show of the weekly recap of Madden. If you could promise me it is 30 minutes of Scott Hansen, I don't even care that parts of it sound robotic, the awkward like they've just got to plug in the pre-recorded lines, don't care. I will sit and watch that. It is so great. You get the halftime reports like that. Scott Hansen is the GOAT and it's such a cool. I miss when games used to do like halftime shows or recaps or like that
it's
was a thing in older sports games and it
Yeah,
feels like it's gone
I mean,
away.
I personally, I think it's kind of the sad part is I think they look at the data, kind of like the coin toss. They've learned that players press A or press X all the time and skip them, or they watch them the first few times and do it. And I think personally, like I think the halftime show is great, and I think it's cool. But for me, I personally really like this weekly recap thing because the halftime show. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of times, I am one of the people that after like the first few times, I'm like, "Yo, let's just keep rolling. Next quarter, next stuff. Let's get through the game." Weekly recaps. That's usually I'm just hanging out in the mode, just kind of looking at stuff. Like I'm bored, I'm looking through stats. I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? Let's see what happened. And I think that I'm with you. I don't know if I need a 30-minute every time, even though that'd be kind of great. But no, I do agree. The weekly recaps and stuff, and the addition of Scott Hansen, probably by far the best thing that I think they've done. At least looking at some of this.
I'm also just floored that it was him and they didn't try to do like some, Dan Orlovsky or some, Pat McAfee. They didn't try to go with the like a guy who's a talking head on
Yeah.
TV. They went with kind of the best in the business at just calling out what's happening. That was, I think, the thing that most surprised me when I saw that it was him doing it. Is like of all of the personalities they could have tried to go with, they didn't go with a former player. They didn't go with the shock factor or the entertainment value. They went with the guy that does this week in and week out. And so it seems like such a small thing, but with what they could have done, I was really glad that they went with him.
And at the end of the day, I think it's cool because like, look, playing by yourself, you're only going to care so much about sometimes what the computer's doing. But playing with other people in like an online
Hmm.
franchise and being able to see these updates and maybe looking at them that and breaking down these, listen to them break down like, oh, my division rival, which is actually a real person, what they kind of did in their game is kind of cool to see. Even if I only see a highlight or so, I think it's really cool. Which kind of goes into a little bit of the other parts, because we're there. The presentation in this game is actually fantastic.
Hmm.
Like, I know we always talk about CFB, we got the drum, we talked about like all the music and all the bands and everything, even if they can't march properly, as you said. But I'm not gonna lie, some of the runouts and some of the traditions that now NFL teams have finally started embracing, and hey, people want to do quote unquote traditional things. People want to have a shtick or something. But seeing them embrace that and how they look on the game and walking in the entrance and the music and everything, I think is fantastic. And even the broadcast, having four different broadcasts, like, yeah, you hear me see if we can get broadcast, but no, I think the broadcasting of four different unique, like Sunday night, Thursday night, Monday night, I think is fit very well done.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I was just confirming. I was looking up to confirm that it wasn't just there and I'd missed it. But I would love to see them doing Renegade at Heinz Field in a Steeler game, doing their big fourth quarter hype up the defense. Like, there's some
Right.
little things that I'm sure they could add. But yeah, and it's one of those things. I don't care about those things until I don't realize I care about those things until I see them. And
Yes,
then when they're
exactly.
happening, I'm like, oh, this is great. It's similar to like in CFB when you've got the mascots doing things, or you've got like, Oklahoma and it's got the wagon coming out. Like you just have things where you're just like, I never, if that wasn't here, I wouldn't have been thinking about, oh man, I really miss this. But when it's there, it stands out in a good way. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, this is just a really neat way to make this feel like watching an NFL game and that experience, and that the experience isn't just the gameplay, it's the other stuff that happens in between. And I agree. I think it's super cool that they're adding more, and this is the best presentation wise Madden has been in a very long time.
No, I love the route that they did where look, we can talk about ESPN, we can talk about Disneyland and all the other presentation. I love that they did their own unique EA Sports presentational stuff. They got creative with it. They could do their own things. They made them look different. They felt each one felt unique. They brought in different broadcasters. That I thought it was great. I love what they did there. I hope we get more that. I hope it spreads as we've talked about. Because we at the end of the day we know what come happens here and does well, what happens CFB does well. They're going back and forth now, and that's what we loved when we were children, having that thing. And obviously, there's to a degree a point, but like, no, I like what they built in these different presentations and how like, oh, we're doing it, EA Sports NFL broadcast, and we're doing this, and I really liked it because I do think one outside the money and licensing and how much some of these companies nowadays for basic things. We all hate you, FIFA. Um, is ridiculous, but we've seen even like with CFB to way of like you have to do it and fit in this perfect box with nothing else, and you can't even, if it needs a 90-degree angle, it needs to be 90 degree because if you do 89, it's off, and so I think them being able to like, no, we can do a circle if we want to. I think was great, and because you still get the same experience, the same presentation, the same, all the quality of it. But now you get that more creative freedom, and I think it just works out perfectly.
Yep, agreed.
I never thought I'd say that about a Madden or even just NFL game in general, because I'm so used to the college games where I've been to plenty of them of like, no, we're doing wild stuff, and now they're doing Viking horns, and
I
I'm
mean,
like, wow, where we get here?
even like I mean, I go up to a Steeler game every year, and they have like a drum line that plays in the stadium, and then outside afterwards, they like congregate, and there's literally thousands of people surrounding them watching it. Like, well, I think the thing that people love most about college football is the atmosphere. Yes, the sport is really fun, watching the game is really fun, but being in that environment, whether it's watching it on TV and just seeing what's happening, or obviously going to games live and seeing, it's the extra stuff.
Yeah.
It's what's happening in between the plays or in between the quarters. It's all of that that makes it worth it. And so to bring just a little bit of that to the virtual space and not just oh hey, they're still using pre-rendered images from 2002. It's super nice to see that. And I hope they do more with that. I hope they find ways to continue to evolve with that. And I hope that the teams are seeing, man, people really love this in the video game. We should continue to explore doing more things like this in real life at games.
No, I believe we're getting more drone shows, and I believe it because at this point they're like, yo, people want this atmosphere, and if we can do drone shows, if we can just have people play bang on giant drums, we don't care. People will love it. And I think it's
Yep.
a bit like we talk about history, and I don't want to derail too much because probably need to get out of here. But no, people have always liked these weird traditions that people do, whether it's been schools and everything else. And so seeing, the professional space actually finally like realize like, no, we talk about the Premier League like all the time, and like going to like and seeing those fans and the sports what they do overseas, like why is it so much better? I'm like, yo, because they're just chanting and singing actual songs. They're not "We will win" or whatever that loser chant is. They're making actual like, everything, and they're embracing all this stuff of just being together and doing unique things. And I'm glad to see, the NFL and professional sports over in the States are like finally realizing like, no, people want to do that. They don't really care if it's dumb. They want to do that.
Yeah, it gets to the point of the thing that draws people to sports is the community. It's not the 11 players, or I guess in this case, 22 players on the field. They're doing stuff like that's cool, but the players come and go. It's the community of following a team and being invested in that. And so being able to see in the Madden games the little touches that make it personal, whether it's just what's happening in the stadiums, the cities, the different things that over the years they've continued to improve on, that brings that sense of community to someone who's playing it, where it's, hey, I might not be able to, attend a game because I live in a different city and I can't do this, but I can at least experience those things that connect fans in this way. And I think it's only a positive both in real life when they're doing it and in the game when they're able to allow people to experience that. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I do think at some point you'll still have to make sure your gameplay is tight and good, but all those other bells and whistles, that definitely is what elevates, in my opinion, a lot of these things. Any last thoughts before we get out of here?
I just want to say the menus are bad.
They are bad.
The menus there is a screenshot which I believe we put into my review, and I need to post it too. When I was in the draft in franchise mode, they got this liquid glass looking stuff where you cannot read the names of the players or their position or the stuff you scouted. Like what who in the Tim Apple thought this was a good idea? That's
It's not
it's
good.
easily fixable. It's easily
Yeah.
you can fix the opacity. Like you they can go in and fix it. But so much of that, and then even the regular menus when you're out on the screen, like it has some moments where it's hard to read, but the bigger thing is just like everything's buried within layers. So to get to things like making trades, you've got to go through a couple of different things to get there. It's just like I understand when you have so many things, you don't want it all to be on the main screen, but to a point, it does get a little bit frustrating to have to click through so many different things and like loading in to view my player card for some reason has a loading screen.
Look,
Like
hey, at least it works sometimes. I had a bunch of times where the player didn't work or I loaded in a coach. It's funny because coming from CFB, where been in UI menu hell for like at this point 2 years, I was actually shocked at kind of how bad the menus were, and I was like, "Oh, this is just a regular thing apparently." Like they're very slow to maneuver. They take forever. They like I said, some of them don't load in properly. I'm still just gonna blame Apple for whatever you saw because that was an abomination.
it's fair.
But yeah, it is interesting to see if like the menus being what they are. I do think the UI is a little better here than CFB in a lot of ways, but also the menus are
Agreed.
still a mess, and it's just interesting. I don't personally mind too much loading screens, but it is interesting of like having a loading screen and then something still doesn't load properly has been not fascinating, but interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's just hard because so many other things, even like going into a game, loads so much faster than it used
Yes,
to. You don't have time to get up and like go make breakfast and then come back and it's still loading you into the game. Like all of that is faster. So it is mind-blowing to me that so many of these other things are small. And I like it's so I think it's a good thing for your game when these are the things that are bothering people. It's not like, oh, hey, my offensive linemen don't block or my players are glitching out on the screen. Like so that stuff is there and the gameplay is there and the presentation is there and all of that. But there are still some things that it doesn't make sense that these kind of become the afterthought because at the end of the day, most players are going to spend the bulk of their time in the menus.
yes,
And so to have that run so poorly is really frustrating. And it is funny that it happens in both CFB and Madden and in the other in like FIFA. That's one of my biggest complaints about FIFA is the menus are awful.
sure.
Or I'm sorry,
That is
EA
EA
Sports
Sports
FC.
FC. Get it correct.
Sorry,
We
I
are official
apologize.
names around here.
I apologize. But it's I don't know. I think it's funny that it's like a company wide. Maybe they should get their menu teams together, or maybe it's just one guy in like
I
a closet under
I
the
feel bad,
stairs.
but it is just one of those of like, man, I don't understand why menus are so bad.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's not. I don't think it's a super hard thing to fix. I just feel like they're prioritizing other things, and I get that. But at the end of the day, when we have to constantly be going through menus to get to things, it can't be a chore. It can't be frustrating. It's kind of like nowadays when people get into a game and you get one of those like, oh, you're gonna walk through the crack in the wall, and this is like the little sly. Like we don't need to be doing those things. There's the technology is better where
yeah,
this doesn't have to run poorly and we just go, well, the systems can't handle it. Like they can and they do. And so it could be improved. They're just not using the resources on it, which I am glad that the resources, at least it's not like they're cheapening out on the
correct.
most important parts of the game. But now I would like to see some attention paid to that as they go forward with a stronger foundation to build on.
Cool. And my last thought is I'm very mad and upset and salty in the fact that I play a Madden game. I see exactly how my guy progresses, what he gets points for, how he gets points for, my coach, what he does, how he gets points. After every single game, it gives me a progress history, progression history. All right, CFB, we need this in here. I don't like having a bar and guessing on what's happening. I learned that, like, basically, depending on the downs, you get, just playing downs is great. We kind of knew that a little bit, CFB. We know that, man. I know that sometimes I need 5,000, 10,000, 18,000 points to level somebody. Um, some of those little integral small things that I think Madden's been taking for granted forever. I'd like to see come over, but obviously we are a Madden NFL thing. But that was big thing outside of probably the menus and stuff. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure we've been going on for a while. We can probably go ahead and just you got some last one thing you got to see
Just
it.
one
Whatever
last
you
quick
are.
thing. They gave a lot of customization options to creating a coaches that it's so much better than it had been in like I know 2 years ago in CFB it was like you can wear a shirt or a jacket. Now in Madden there's hundreds of options, but I will shout out Kate. who has been complaining about all of the coaching options are ugly.
They're
Every
not
single
great.
coach looks like me and Matt.
I look fantastic, but they don't even look this bad or this good either.
No,
Um,
it's just funny. But yeah, I it just goes again back to they're spending resources on certain things, and it's like, man, just a couple little tweaks in some other areas would be great.
cool, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Kyle, for coming on here. Obviously, everybody go feel free to go read Kyle's full review of Madden NFL 26 at butwilo.net. And we're out. Goodbye.